Hello students, this is Dr. Arindam, and in this class we'll be recalling the DNA structure so that we are ready for replication. Okay, then as I told you, I'll not be going into the details of how DNA structure is made. Technically this class comes after DNA and RNA structure has been taught already. Alright, so I presume that you know or remember at least something, but I will still brush those gray areas so that you can get yourself ready for the next series that will be on molecular biology. So from the next video we will be directly going into replication. Now this is the DNA, and as you know, it is named DNA, stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Now for this purpose, this is a ball model. All right, now for various purpose of this video we will be representing the same DNA in various structures. So for example, this is a planar structure. Okay, we have converted that 2D 3D into a two-dimensional structure, right? Now the DNA is actually dsDNA. It is also referred to dsDNA because ds stands for double stranded. All right, double stranded DNA. You can see one strand is the blue one and the other strand is the magenta one. So these are the two strands of DNA, or so it is also known as dsDNA. And see, again we have converted this form into a two-dimensional form. So technically in the 3D cloud space it acts it is visualized just as this figure. All right, but for the sake of understanding we have made it simple into a planar figure. Now this thing remains twisted in a double helical fashion. Okay, so now we will unwind this thing. Okay, so we'll open the twist, and when we open the twist it simply looks like this. This is the whole thing that is twisted onto itself, so that this thing when twists onto itself becomes this thing. Okay, it simply twists. We have untwisted the whole thing, right? So on unwinding we see that this whole thing is made up of repeating units of this. Okay, so it is poly this. So what is this? This is a nucleotide. I'm sorry, this whole thing is a nucleotide. So what's a nucleotide? A nucleotide is made up of a phosphate, okay, a sugar and a nitrogenous base. All right, this sugar specifically has got 5 sides. Okay, so it's a furan structure. Basically it's nothing but a pentose sugar, right? And this base can be either one of the 4. They are adenine, okay, guanine, thymine and cytosine. All right, so all of these are nucleotides. So a nitrogenous base, a pentose sugar and a phosphate makes nucleotide. What's a nucleoside? If we cut this phosphate group out, it becomes a nucleoside. Only this is now a nucleoside. So cytosine. Okay, so what's the example of nucleoside? These adenosine, guanosine. Okay, they are example of nucleosides. So adenosine monophosphate, adenosine diphosphate or adenosine triphosphate, whenever we add a phosphate group it becomes a nucleotide, right? So now we focus a bit on the sugar. Okay, so how is this special? This sugar in case of DNA, all right, has got this hydroxyl group removed, okay, or it is devoid of a hydroxyl group at this position, right? Now what is this position? As a convention, we number the carbon atom of the nitrogenous bases from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like that, and therefore we have two cyclic compounds in this structure. So in case of the pentose sugar, we name it 1 prime, 2 prime, 3 prime, 4 prime and 5 prime, alright, or 5 dash, 1 dash, 2 dash. So in case of DNA, it is devoid of a hydroxyl group at the 2 prime position. So it is a deoxynucleotide, alright. It is a deoxynucleotide, but compared to ribose, okay, this is deoxyribose. Compared to ribose, ribose has got a hydroxyl group in the 2 prime position, right? Now, if we, as I told you in the earlier slide, if we start to number from this carbon atom, okay, we will end up in a 5 prime position. Now, at the 1 prime position, the nitrogenous base is attached, and at the 5 prime position, the phosphate is attached. Now, if we look closely, we can see the phosphate is also attached to another carbon of a neighboring nucleotide, right? This is what carbon? This is the third carbon, this one. So this will be connected to a phosphate, and so on and so forth. This chain will continue, alright. So a 3 prime position of the neighbor will form a dash bond with its neighboring nucleotide. What is that bond? That is known as phosphodiester bond, alright. So a 3 prime and a 5 prime. So 3 prime, 5 prime phosphodiester bond. These are the backbone of the polynucleotide chain. So this is the backbone. This is a 3 prime, 5 prime phosphodiester bond, and it is what type of bond? It is covalent bond, alright. Now apart from that, this covalent bond, you see, so now if we zoom out from this whole structure, alright, we will see from left to right, okay, depending on the reading sequence, this strand is running from 5 prime to 3 prime. So this is 5 prime to 3 prime, and the whole thing is actually reversed in its complementary strand, okay. Complementary strand, what happens? It is 3 prime to 5 prime. Get my point? Now these strands are often named after the discoverer. The discoverer of this model of DNA in 1953 was Watson and Crick. So this strand, this 5 prime to 3 prime strand, is also known as Watson strand, okay, and this 3 prime to 5 prime strand is also known as Crick strand. Now we know that these are the covalent bonds, that is the phosphodiester bonds that make the handrail or the backbone, right? Apart from that, there are many non-covalent bonds. So what are those non-covalent bonds? Those non-covalent bonds are the bonds that exist between these, okay. So these are hydrogen bonds. So you can see in between G and C, we have got scope to make 3 hydrogen bonds, and in between A and T, we have got scope to make 2 hydrogen bonds. So this is known as Chargaff's rule, as you already know by now. So these actually, by the hydrogen bonds, they form a base pair. So A always pairs up with T. So thymine pairs up with adenine via 2 hydrogen bonds, and cytosine pairs up with guanine with the help of 3 hydrogen bonds, right? Now from your nucleotide chemistry chapter, this thing you are knowing by now, obviously, that T and C, that is thymine and cytosine and pyrimidines, because they have got a single ring structure, And what happens with purines? Purines have got a double ring structure. So over here there is another ring structure for purines. So adenine and guanine are purine that are connected with the help that has got a hexagonal structure along with a pentagon ring. So bi-ring structure in case of purines. Now what about other structures? Okay, see, if we try to pair G along with T, their molecular configuration and the bond that face each other, the hydrophilic and hydrophobic part, the polar part that actually takes part in hydrogen bonds, are not at all energetically favorable. So this G and T double bond will never happen. Okay, so the rule is A with T and G with C, right? So you can see these are the non-covalent bonds that make up the DNA molecule along with the covalent backbone of phosphodiester bonds. Now the width of the DNA, if we consider, okay, this is a three-dimensional thing, the whole thing is twisted. If we look at this, the whole thing has got the same width, but this width will vary, it will spiral. Okay, for our sake of simplicity we have unwinded this. So this is the width of the DNA and it is approximately 1.9 to 2 nanometer. All right, this is the width of the DNA. Now now we have twisted the whole thing. Okay, so the polynucleotide structure has been twisted. Now each turn, okay, one turn means like this. Okay, so one turn actually has got 10 base pairs from here to here. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. So this thing is important for you. Why? Because you need to know the distance between them. The total distance is 3.4 nanometer. Okay, and the distance between each nucleotide is 0.34 nanometer. Remember guys, there is another unit that is angstrom. Okay, that is denoted by A. Nano is 10 to the power minus 9 meter and angstrom is 10 to the power minus 10. So if you are representing angstrom, it will be 3.4 angstrom and 34 angstrom. Okay, but don't get confused between two units. Okay, fine. So the width is 1.9 to 2 and the one turn is pitch is 3.4 nanometer. Now we know that these are the hydrogen bonds, all right, that pairs the bases, but apart from them there are certain other non-covalent bonds that also helps in stabilizing the DNA structure. Those are the interaction between the adjacent bases, that is also known as base stacking. BAAC STACKING, stack. Okay, they are stacked upon one another. That happens due to the pi-pi interaction. What is pi-pi interaction? Sharing of electron. There is a probability of sharing of electron from the outer orbitals between the adjacent bases. So that is pi-pi interaction. So that is one non-covalent bond that is also stabilizing the DNA structure. Now based on the spatial conformation, okay, based on the pi-pi interaction, based on the electron sharing probability and based on the 3D conformation, we can see that these every turn is not, this is one turn, okay, but if we see a twist, they are a bit separated. Okay, what I mean to say is this distance is actually more than this distance, so there is a more less, this thing is repeated. Okay, so what are these? So this gap is actually small and this gap is actually large. So based on these, a DNA in a spatial 3D conformation, okay, these are known as grooves. So the bigger one is known as a major groove and the smaller one is minor groove. Okay. What's the importance of major and minor grooves? They are the sites where protein will attach. Okay, proteins will interact with DNA based on the major and minor grooves. Okay, so what protein? For example, I'll tell you in a while. Nucleosome, histone protein, those things. Histone protein, for example. So you see, this is the end-on view. We are seeing the whole thing from the side. So this actually is the major groove, and this one is the minor groove. Minor. And this one is a major groove, right? So if we see the end-on view, a huge protein has come and attached itself to the DNA structure. So this is these interaction can be sequence specific or sequence non-specific. Now based on the protein structure, they can adjust and stick themselves into the minor and the major grooves. Okay, so this is all about the 3D structure of DNA that you need to know about. Now let us recall a few things. Okay, so what did I discuss till now? Watson and Crick model of double helical DNA. The adjacent bases are separated by 0.34 nanometer, and the distance and the width of the helix, this helix, is actually 2 nanometer, right? So this is actually a right-handed double helix. Okay, polydeoxyribonucleotide chains. Okay, polydeoxyribonucleotide chains twisted around one another. The backbone or handrail is constituted by sugar and phosphate, and the bases are actually perpendicular to the helix. So if this is the helix, the bases are perpendicular. No doubt in that. An important information that backbone has a net negative charge, right? Now you already know about Chargaff's rule. Chargaff's rule says it says adenine pairs with thymine and guanine pairs with cytosine. Okay, so A will always pair with T and T will always pair with A, double bond, and T, I'm sorry, I think something wrong is written in this slide. Okay, so this is cytosine. Okay, my mistake, I typed it wrongly. This will be cytosine. Cytosine pairs with guanine, triple bond. Okay, and the quantities, that is A equals to T and C equals to G by default. Next, the non-covalent bonds are hydrogen bonds. So 2 between A and T and 3 between C and G. And apart from that, base stacking that I told you, pi-pi interaction and hydrophobic interaction between the adjacent bases also act to stabilize the DNA. I told you that one strand is 5' to 3' and another strand is 3' to 5'. So they are actually known as anti-parallel. Of course they are parallel, but their directions are different. So this strand is known as Watson strand and the 3' to 5' strand is known as Crick strand. Okay. Now going to the basics of replication. So what happens? Each strand acts as a template, you know already, but I'll be discussing this in great detail. So one strand actually forms a parent, okay, and it acts as a parent strand from which a daughter strand will be synthesized. This is a semi-conservative model of replication. All right, if these two are parent strands, this will disintegrate, this will be separated, okay, that is known as melting, and from which a daughter strand will be synthesized. Okay, now I told you pitch of the spiral is 3.4 nanometer per turn. I am telling you again and again, one turn, okay, 3.4 nanometer, because these are the questions that will be asked repeatedly in MCQ and will be asked repeatedly in Viva. Diameter, width of the axis is 1.9 to 2 nanometer, okay, same thing. And between the, what's the importance of the major and minor grooves, you can see, I'll just erase this so that you can see. The major groove dimension is 1.2 nanometer and the minor groove is 0.6 nanometer. Actually these won't be asked, okay? The dimensions are not that much important for you, but you should know that minor groove is actually half the size of major groove, okay? These are parallel to the phosphodiester backbone and wind along with the molecule. It means that this is the direction of the grooves, okay? So basically they are running parallel to the backbone, okay? So if you see, these are the phosphodiester bonds, okay? Since we have twisted, the whole thing is now twisted, and minor grooves also run along with them, so they are parallel to the phosphodiester backbone. Next, histones. Histones will come as a short note. Now you can take a small break over here. I just want to cover everything so that we can go to the next class and we can study replication to start with. I don't want to keep this small thing for another video, okay? So histones. So what are histones? Histones are proteins that has got usually higher concentration of basic amino acid. Now what are the basic amino acids? As I told you, a mnemonic is there, very funny mnemonic. His basics are loose. His basics are loose, okay? So histidine, arginine and lysine. So histidine, arginine and lysine are basic amino acids, so his basics are loose. So naturally histone protein, as the name suggests, they have got ample amount of histidine in their conformation. Along with histidine, there are few other amino acids that will help to classify the histone protein. So there are 5 classes of histone proteins: 1, 2A, 2B, 3 and 4, right? Now they also vary in concentration. How do they vary? See, the one thing you should know, that H1 is actually loosely attached to the DNA. How it happens? It forms an octamer, okay? You can't see octamer because the another 4 is on that side, okay? It's buried underneath, so this can be another 4. And a DNA actually coils twice around whole this thing. Now these are H2A, 2B, 3 and 4, and this H1 is loosely attached outside. I'll show you the structure. So these 2A, 2B and 3 and 4 are core histone proteins, okay? These are core histones, all right? So as I told you, again I need to erase it. I am making a mess of this thing. So H2A and H2B are lysine rich, okay? And 3 and 4 are arginine rich. I already told you lysine and arginine are also basic amino acids. Excuse me. Now all histones except H1 are present in equimolar concentration. H1 is present in half concentration, alright? So the amount of H1 that is present is half compared to H2A, H2B, H3 and H4. Now this histone synthesis stops when DNA synthesis stops. When there is no need to synthesize new DNA, this histone is also no longer needed, because histones help in coiling of the DNA. So if there is no need of DNA, there is no need of coiling. So this thing you should remember. Now one more important thing, generally histones are related to DNA, okay? So and DNA is present in one organelle, that is nucleus. So when students are asked that histones are synthesized where, they often apply their common sense and they say nucleus, but that is not. Histones are actually synthesized in the cytoplasm and then they migrate to the nucleus, all right? Now these histones are modified by three methods: acetylation, methylation, and phosphorylation. This you should know because the MCQ usually gives another method, okay, say sulfation, okay, then you need to select that odd one out. So remember, histones are modified by acetylation, methylation, and phosphorylation. Any other method is a distractor from the real MCQ. So it can come all of the following except, okay, then you need to choose that method other than these three methods, right? Now, what happens in case of, so how phosphorylation takes place? So, in case of H1, the phosphorylation actually takes place prior to mitosis. Okay, and 2A, 2B, it takes place during the S phase, synthesis phase. So, phosphorylation of serine and threonine residues of H1 occurs prior to mitosis. Even before mitosis starts, phosphorylation of these histone protein happens. And 2B is associated with the S phase of cell cycle. So it happens during the synthetic phase of cell cycle. These are the two recent MCQs. That is why I have included this in the slide. Now, as I told you, see, these are the octamers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are the core histones. Okay, core histones as octamer. So this can be 2A, 2B, 3 and 4. And this is the H1, which is loosely associated, and DNA wraps twice around this histone octamer to form a nucleosome. So one nucleosome is what? It is a DNA wrapped twice around the core histone protein. Now you should know, you need to know a lot more than nucleosome. So higher organization of DNA. So it happens in higher organisms. See, in lower organism, for example, a bacteria, simple circular DNA was present. Okay, there was no condensation, no chromosome, nothing. But we evolved. Okay, we evolved into great plants and animals from that bacteria, and so our structural information, genetic information, the neural information, everything is stored inside the genetic material, that is DNA. So that the space required was so much more that DNA grew in size. It had to. But the physical size of the organisms didn't grow that much compared to the size of DNA. So DNA had to adapt, so it had to coil. It had to coil and coil and coil and get shrunken. Okay, so this is how higher organization of DNA happens. It's first wounded over histosomes. Okay, it's wounded over histones and it forms nucleosome. Okay, histone and nucleosome. Okay, don't mispronounce just as I did right now. All right, so this nucleosome. Now a long stretch of DNA in association with histone is a chromatin. Okay, so it means what? These nucleosomes, suppose it's 10 nanometer, this a thrice, a triple of this much size, so a lot of histones will be attached. This is known as chromatin. Okay, now we are relatively looking at the size. So this will condense, so approximately 10 times extended. Okay, so it keeps on coiling and coiling the chromatin, and ultimately just imagine the number of times, almost 50 times it coils, so 30 nanometer to 1400 nanometer. Okay, it now becomes a condensed chromatin and a chromosome. Okay, you should have a relative idea about the scale at which DNA is coiling. There are exceptions to that. Chromosomal DNA include plasmids, which are found in most bacteria and other organisms. They are often not coiled like that. Okay, because plasmid, you will be taught this in future classes when you will be taught recombinant DNA technology. So ignore this point, just forget this extra. Okay, totally, I'll be explaining this in much detail in future. Now let us look at few steps of DNA denaturation. So what is denaturation? Remember guys, we have already crept into the domains of replication. So what happens? This is a double-stranded DNA. Okay, we simplify it and so if these were the base pairs. So we simplify and look at the base pairs. So what happens? Denaturation, both the strands will separate. This is known as denaturation of DNA. Okay, denaturation of DNA is nothing but separation of the two strands of DNA. Generally, the most common denaturing agent is heat. Okay. Now, you have read about colorimeter. So in colorimeter, what happens? We measure color of a substance, okay, in visible light. But these DNA and RNA also exhibit an absorbance or an optical density, all right, and that is present under ultraviolet light, UV light. And the instrument that measures the OD in UV light is a spectrophotometer. Strangely, it has been found that DNA, when denatures, the absorbance increases. Okay, this is known as hyperchromicity. That is increase in optical absorbance or optical density of DNA under UV light in a spectrophotometer during denaturation. Okay, this is known as hyperchromicity. Now, as I told you, there are multiple reagents, suppose 8 molar urea, HCl, there are multiple agents, excess salt, all of them will denature the DNA, right? But the most common being heat, and denaturation of DNA by heat is also known as melting. Alright. Now, this is specific temperature that is known as TM or melting temperature. It is a temperature at which half of the DNA has been denatured. Right. Now, needless to say, in order to melt or denature, we need to break these hydrogen bonds. Okay. Now, in case of A and T, there are 2 hydrogen bonds, and in case of G and C, there are 3 hydrogen bonds. So, if there are more G and C in this DNA, we'll need more heat, isn't it? So, we'll need more heat to rip this apart. And so, the temperature required to denature will also be high. So, a GC rich DNA melts at higher temperature. Fine, clear? Because a GC rich DNA will need energy to break apart 3 bonds. Okay, GC rich means there are multiple triple bonds. AT rich DNA means multiple double bonds. Those are easy to break compared to triple bonds. So the reverse of melting. Okay, so now these strands are separated. Suppose at 60 degrees centigrade we have separated the 2 strands. Now if we allow them to remain at the same situation, and if we just cool in the same solution, if we just cool the temperature, it will be seen that as the temperature cools down, say 40 degrees centigrade, the both strands will again reunite, and the phospho and the hydrogen bonds, not phosphodiester bond, the hydrogen bonds will be reformed. This is known as annealing. Melted strands are reassociated at lower temperature. This is known as annealing. When we will be discussing PCR or polymerase chain reaction, you will see this denaturation, annealing, these steps will be repeated once more. Now, there are reagents like formamide. What they do? They actually disrupt these hydrogen bonds. These are chemical disruption of hydrogen bonds, and so now the DNA will break apart easily. Just a few degrees centigrade will help that. So the TM is actually lowered. Okay. It has been used in DNA hybridization studies, and it lowers the TM by disrupting the hydrogen bonds between the bases. And as I told you, the covalent bonds, that is phosphodiester bonds, are not broken. So even if these 2 strands become separate, the individual bases will not become isolated nucleotides. So this polynucleotide chain will maintain because phosphodiester bond is not broken in the process, right? So what is supercoiling of DNA? Okay. Now this DNA, we are almost at the end of our discussion. Okay. This is a double helix. Now, in order to accommodate further, it will twist around its own axis. So this thing will be further twisted. Okay, extra force. We don't need to know the mechanism of supercoiling. Okay, but we need to know who helps in supercoiling and who breaks this supercoils. Okay, so let us first talk about the enzymes that breaks this supercoils. So any enzyme that will break apart these will now suddenly it will unwind. Okay, so these are topoisomerases. So topoisomerases can relax the supercoil. So there are actually two types of topoisomerase, 1 and 2. But who will induce supercoiling? That is DNA gyrase. Okay, gyrases are the enzymes that can help in supercoil insertion. Now DNA gyrase will be taught in detail in inhibitor of replication, because drugs like fluoroquinolones, FLUORO quinolones, these fluoroquinolones, they help in inhibiting, they inhibit this DNA gyrase. So this supercoil will not be formed and bacterial replication will be hampered. So what are these fluoroquinolones? Ciprofloxacin, norfloxacin, okay, ofloxacin. So any kind of stomach upset or diarrhea, you take tablets like O2. Okay, this is a very common brand, so it contains ofloxacin. Or any UTI, I mean urinary tract infection, you take norfloxacin. So these are the drugs that helps in bacterial inhibition by attacking DNA gyrase. They will be taught in detail in pharmacology, so I am not going into those details. So the next part is how the bases are modified prior to replication or during replication. So this slide is very important. Okay, why? Because this, depending on what time you are watching this video is being released in June 2020, and just these years AIIMS PG exam featured this question. Okay, so the question was an extensive one: what process does not need methylation? But many of them by mistake ticked on replication. The replication is not the answer, because in replication bases are extensively methylated. Actually direct methylation occurs in for 6-methyl cytosine and 6-methyl adenine. What happens? Actually methylation condenses and represses the activity. What do I mean? In case the DNA, after DNA is formed, it will form RNA with the help of transcription. If methylation happens, it will not transcribe. So methylation actually represses. Repression means deactivation. And demethylation, if methylation does not happen, it leads to transcriptional activation. So mind it. Again, when we are discussing transcription in future classes, we will be taking this on. And moreover, methylation is used to identify the parent strand of DNA during replication. So DNA polymerase need to identify which one is the parent strand and which one is the daughter strand, and methylation helps in that process. Next, this is a small oral question, oral viva question. How many types of genes are there? Okay, I'm just doing few things extra because I don't think there will be room to cover them in future classes. So you'll find this list in your textbook. So just remember 2 to 3 of these. So suppose tumor suppressor gene, as the name suggests, it will suppress cancer or malignancy. And oncogenes are the opposite ones, which will simply cause malignancy, right? So pseudogenes are the genes that are not expressed. Synthetic genes are designer genes. Regulator genes, repressor. So applying your knowledge, homeotic genes are the one that helps in our morphogenesis, that is formation. And transposons come as a short note. These are mobile genes that keep on moving from one place to another. This will be taught later. I'll make a separate video on transposon. This is an advanced topic, not asked generally, but if you are asked, then you must be getting a very good marks already. Now, during differentiation, cell division, actually the whole information is stored in the zygote, right? So all the genetic information is stored in that DNA, but it has been found out that only 10% of the DNA is active, and that is enough to transmit all the genetic information, okay? And about 90% of the DNA is permanently inactive. So there are multiple science fiction movies that targets this inactive part of DNA, what if they are activated and so, but we don't need to get into that. Just know this, the 10% are only essential. Now you already know about introns, exons and cistrons, okay? So what are the cistrons? Are the whole thing, the DNA part. Now introns are the one after the initial, the primary transcript, okay? Primary transcript means from DNA, RNA will be formed, right? So from DNA, RNA is formed. Now, actually, the part of RNA, not all of them will be used to translate, okay? What I mean is, from mRNA, translation will happen to form protein. Okay, so now if we see, this whole part is DNA. Okay, now suppose these are the parts of DNA. Now mRNA, the information that is needed to form mRNA is only present in these areas. Okay, so if transcription occurs from these areas, and mRNA that is enough to produce a protein will be produced. Okay, if this appears confusing, then please wait patiently. I'll be making separate classes for transcription and post-transcriptional modification, everything, and then this thing will be explained in great detail. I am just telling you so that you become oriented, and for those who already know, this is a good revision. So these areas from which ultimately the final mRNA information is available, these are known as introns. Okay, and the rest, these are exons. I'm so sorry, these are exons. Introns are the silent areas. Okay, silent areas are the introns, and the active areas are the exons. So from exons are the one that is most important. Okay, so exons will be transcribed, introns are not. So the primary transcript contains intron sequences which are later removed to produce a mature mRNA. Get my point? So introns are not translated. So the primary, see this is a DNA molecule, and from which an RNA molecule will be produced. But the mature mRNA does not need everything. So the parts which are used to form this mature mRNA are introns, exons, okay, and these are introns which are not translated. So the next part that we'll be not discussing, this is a teaser for the next proper molecular biology class where we'll be taking replication of DNA. I intended to make a replication video to start with, but I thought that it may be a bit daunting for you who have not touched DNA and RNA for a while. So we will start rightly with Mesanson and Stahl experiment. Okay, that's a very interesting experiment, and we'll be discussing that, how they proved that semi-conservative replication of DNA in 1958, where there were no technique of sequencing. So very interesting experiment, and then we will slowly go into the proper replication. So that's it guys, that's it for today. Feel free to get back to me in the comment section. Any problem in molecular biology, I'll be happy to help you out. If you have got requests for making a separate short videos, please mention the topics in the comment section, and I'll be happy to make those videos for you. So thanks for watching. Till then, bye and take care.